14.1.1 Mammalian nervous system. Structure and role of the mammalian nervous system. The human nervous system consists of the central nervous system, CNS, the brain and the spinal cord. Peripheral nervous system, PNS, all of the nerves in the body. It allows us to make sense of our surroundings and respond to them, coordinate and regulate body functions. Information is sent through the nervous system as nerve impulses, electrical signals that pass along nerve cells known as neurones. A bundle of neurons is known as a nerve. The human nervous system. 14.1.2 Types of neurons. Neuron diagrams. There are three main types of neuron: sensory, relay and motor. Sensory neurons carry impulses from sense organs to the CNS, brain or spinal cord. Relay neurons are found inside the CNS and connect sensory and motor neurons. Motor neurons carry impulses from the CNS to effectors, muscles or glands. Neurons have a long fiber, axon. This means that less time is wasted transferring the impulse from one cell to another. The axon is insulated by a fatty sheath with small uninsulated sections along it, called nodes. This means that the electrical impulse does not travel down the whole axon, but jumps from one node to the next. Their cell body contains many extensions called dendrites. This means they can connect to many other neurons and receive impulses from them, forming a network for easy communication. Identifying the types of neuron. The three types of neuron. Sensory neurons are long and have a cell body branching off the middle of the axon. Relay neurons are short and have a small cell body at one end with many dendrites branching off it. Motor neurons are long and have a large cell body at one end with long dendrites branching off it. Exam tip: a way to remember which neuron is which. Sensory neurons connect a sense organ, e.g. eye, nose, taste buds to the CNS. Motor neurons result in a response, which is often movement. Think of a moving motorbike. 14.1.3 The reflex arc. The reflex arc. Voluntary responses. A voluntary response is one where you make a conscious decision to carry out a particular action, therefore it starts with your brain. An example is reaching out to pick up a cup of coffee. An involuntary, or reflex, response does not involve the brain as the coordinator of the reaction, and you are not aware you have completed it until after you have carried it out. Involuntary actions are usually ones which are essential to basic survival and are rapid, whereas voluntary responses often take longer as we consider what the consequences might be before doing it. Reflex responses. An involuntary, or reflex, response does not involve the brain as the coordinator of the reaction, and you are not aware you have completed it until after you have carried it out. This is an automatic and rapid response to a stimulus such as touching something sharp or hot. As it does not involve the brain, a reflex response is quicker than any other type of nervous response. This helps to minimize the damage to the body. A reflex. The pin, the stimulus, is detected by a pain, pressure, touch receptor in the skin. Sensory neuron sends electrical impulses to the spinal cord, the coordinator. Electrical impulse is passed on to relay neuron in the spinal cord. Relay neuron connects to motor neuron and passes the impulse on. Motor neuron carries impulse to a muscle in the leg, the effector. The muscle will contract and pull the foot up and away from the sharp object, the response. The reflex pathway. Synapses. Where two neurons meet or join, they do so at a junction called a synapse. Synapses allow junctions between neurons, so are important in the nervous system, being a connected network of neurons. Nerve impulses can transmit across synapses and be directed along the appropriate route by them, e.g. to the correct part of the brain. Think about the analogy of railway points that guide the trains onto the appropriate tracks based on the train's destination. Exam tip: reflex actions are automatic, fast, protective. A common exam question is to be asked to draw arrows on the neurons in the reflex arc diagram to show the direction of movement of the impulse. Make sure you read questions carefully. Not all questions have a line underneath them to write an answer, so they can be easy to miss. 14.1.4 The synapse. Structure of a synapse, extended. The junction between two neurons is known as a synapse. A synapse. Synapses and neurotransmitters, extended. Neurons never touch each other. The junctions, gaps, in between are called synapses. The electrical impulse travels along the first axon. This triggers the nerve ending of the presynaptic neuron to release chemical messengers called neurotransmitters from vesicles which fuse with the presynaptic membrane. The neurotransmitters diffuse across the synaptic gap, or cleft, and bind with receptor molecules on the membrane of the second neuron, known as the postsynaptic membrane. This stimulates the second neuron to generate an electrical impulse that travels down the second axon. The neurotransmitters are then destroyed to prevent continued stimulation of the second neuron, which would cause repeated impulses to be sent. Synapses ensure that impulses only travel in one direction, avoiding confusion within the nervous system if impulses were traveling in both directions. As this is the only part of the nervous system where messages are chemical as opposed to electrical, it is the only place where drugs can act to affect the nervous system, e.g., this is where heroin works. How an impulse is passed on at a synapse. Exam tip. For maximum marks, you will need to be able to understand the structure and functioning of a synapse and explain what happens at each step. 14.1.5 Sense organs. Sense organs as receptors. Receptors are groups of specialized cells. They detect a change in the environment and stimulate electrical impulses in response. Sense organs contain groups of receptors that respond to specific stimuli. Once the receptor cell in the sense organ has been stimulated, it generates an electrical impulse. This is passed on to a sensory neuron which carries the impulse to the central nervous system. Here a response will be decided on and the impulse will be passed to a motor neuron, via a relay neuron. The motor neuron carries the impulse to the effector, muscle or gland. The effector carries out the response. Structure and function of the eye. The eye is a sense organ containing receptor cells that are sensitive to light, rod cells, and color, cone cells. The eye. Function of the parts of the eye. The blind spot. At the point where the optic nerve joins the retina, there are no light-sensitive rod and cone cells on that part of the retina. Light falling onto that part of the retina will not result in an image being detected. The brain fills in from surrounding light so we don't see a black hole where no light has fallen. This causes a blind spot, where we cannot detect an object in our peripheral vision even if it is there. The pupil reflex. This is a reflex action carried out to protect the retina from damage in bright light and protect us from not seeing objects in dim light. In dim light the pupil dilates, widens, in order to allow as much light into the eye as possible. In bright light the pupil constricts, narrows, in order to prevent too much light entering the eye and damaging the retina. The pupil reflex. In dim light, the pupil dilates, becomes larger, to allow more light to enter the eye to improve vision.